very near future, not in some far off never never land. And I think these things not because I hope for a glorious change in human nature, or I'm an idealist or a dreamer, but because there's a very strong realist case against nuclear weapons. This realist case is relatively new. It's never been used before, and it's enormously powerful. In February of 2013, I gave a talk at the Pentagon to the A-10 Directorate. The A-10 Directorate is the Air Force's policy, planning, and strategy group for nuclear weapons. We use these arguments, these realist arguments, and we talked for almost 2 hours after the presentation. And at the end of that, one of the highest ranking officers in the room said, well, maybe nuclear weapons are not the deterrent of the future, which is, given that Air Force officers lose their jobs if they express doubts about nuclear deterrence. It was pretty impressive. March of 2015, in the French National Assembly, and there were generals and admirals and think tank experts and former national security advisor of Nicolas Sarkozy and the head of the French nuclear submarine force. And they were all nuclear weapons advocates. It's France, after all. These arguments reduced them to confusion, disbelief, and gloom. They had no answers. Again and again, these new realist arguments have confounded nuclear supporters, and I want to outline them very briefly for you right now. So there are basically three parts. The first is that nuclear weapons are dangerous. A single weapon can devastate a city, and there are thousands of weapons on hair trigger alert in 9 nations around the world. A nuclear war in which all the world's nuclear weapons were used would be a catastrophe so appalling, so huge, it's difficult to even imagine. Nuclear war is unacceptable. The most important priority, topping all others, is to prevent nuclear war. The problem with nuclear war remains urgent because the consequences of nuclear war are so dire. Second, nuclear believers are unrealistic. Most official policy in nuclear armed states is set by a group of nuclear believers that have an exaggerated faith in the importance and impact of nuclear weapons. I don't know exactly how to communicate this to you. I've been struggling with this. It's almost as if they believe in a religion that just isn't true. They believe nuclear weapons have changed human nature, that savage, all-out war has been banished forever. They imagine that they are realists, and they criticize others as dreamers. But they're not realists. They're weapons romantics. Their enthusiasm for the technology has led them to inflate the powers of nuclear weapons out of all proportion. Viewed objectively, nuclear weapons are just not very good weapons. They're enormously dangerous, don't get me wrong. They're just not so useful. They're too big, they leave poison everywhere you use them, and they're a mess. Think about it. What nuclear weapons do best is kill civilians in large numbers. But killing civilians doesn't win wars. In the shootout at the OK Corral, the side that won wasn't the side that shot the most bystanders. It was the side that shot the most gunslingers on the other side that won. Wars are won by killing and disabling your adversary's military. Effective weapons defeat the other side's military. They don't have as their chief characteristic that they accidentally kill thousands of civilians while making any battlefield where they're used so saturated with poison as to be too dangerous for anyone to fight on. The whole trend in warfare is clear evidence that big, blundering weapons are a thing of the past. The future belongs to smarter, smaller, more precise weapons. Nuclear believers do not see the reality staring them in the face. They are trapped in almost a fantasy constructed from outmoded Cold War thinking. They believe nuclear weapons influence everything. They're the key to security. Like children who've been told that nitroglycerin is a magic potion that will always keep them safe. They are innocently running, clutching their nitroglycerin to their chests. And our fate is in their hands. Third and finally, there's deterrence. Nuclear deterrence is the heart of the nuclear believer's case. It's their indispensable idea. Without it, they have nothing. But nuclear deterrence is clearly indefensible because we don't understand it, because it has failed in the past, and because it will inevitably fail in the future. To understand the problem with deterrence, you have to remember that it's a threat, and a threat designed to dissuade an adversary from doing something. And threats, as we know, go on inside your head. But the difficulty is that it's hard to measure something inside someone's head. Science is about measuring. Truth isn't objective unless you can measure it, test it, and other people can reproduce the results. But you can't measure psychological states of mind. Nuclear armed states have tested nuclear weapons more than 2,000 times in deserts and remote parts of the world. The physics of nuclear weapons is really well understood. But the physics is largely beside the point. The important question is not, what does the explosion do on the ground? The important question is, what does the explosion do in the minds of leaders? When I blow up your city, does that make you surrender? When I threaten to blow up your cities, does that make you back down? We have good evidence for what nuclear weapons do to buildings and cars and factories and people's bodies. We don't have good evidence for what they do in the minds of leaders. You can't get a ruler inside someone's head to measure what they're thinking. And even if you could, using high-tech lab equipment or some kind of technology that hasn't yet been invented, no one has ever measured or is ever likely to measure a leader's state of mind during a crisis. So the first problem with nuclear deterrence, and it's a very serious problem, is that all of our evidence is subjective. Almost all claims about nuclear deterrence can't be proved in any objective scientific sense. This raises the second issue. Does deterrence work? Since the lives of millions of people hang in the balance, this is an important question. Some people argue that because the evidence is so subjective, we shouldn't assume that nuclear deterrence ever works. I disagree. I think on balance we can assume that nuclear deterrence does work some of the time. It can prevent wars some of the time. It gives you diplomatic leverage some of the time. It secures treaties some of the time. It's the ultimate guarantee of security some of the time. But here's the difficulty. If nuclear deterrence only works some of the time, we have to get rid of nuclear weapons. Because in order to be safe, nuclear deterrence has to work all of the time. The consequences of nuclear deterrence failure are unacceptable. Deterrence failure could lead to catastrophic all-out nuclear war. All-out nuclear war would mean at least 300 million people killed and civilization wrecked for centuries. If even such an outcome is simply unacceptable, if even the smallest risk of all-out nuclear war exists, then relying on nuclear deterrence is not an option, no key question is not, does deterrence work? The key question is, how often does it fail? Advocates for nuclear weapons understand how crucial this question is. They understand that if deterrence is unreliable, then nuclear weapons have to go. So they boldly assert that nuclear deterrence has a failure rate of 0. Works every time. Cold War crises, they claim, and a few others prove it. But that can't be right. If deterrence never failed, why didn't the U.S. monopoly prevent the Berlin blockade in 1948? If deterrence never failed, why did the Chinese join the Korean War in 1950? If deterrence never failed, how did the Israelis get attacked in 1973? If deterrence never has failed, then why did the Argentines attack the Falkland Islands in 1982? And so on and on. Clearly, nuclear deterrence has failed in the past. Faced with these facts, nuclear believers challenge the definition. Well, these aren't failures, they say, because they didn't lead to nuclear war. It's only a failure if nuclear war breaks out. But that's false reasoning. The fact that things turned out okay isn't proof that no mistakes were made. It's possible, for example, to do something stupid behind the wheel of your car, to make what ought to be a fatal mistake, but not end up dead. Maybe the other guy swerves. Maybe there's divine intervention. Maybe by sheer chance, there's a gap in the traffic coming the other way. We don't completely control what happens. And just as with driving a car, in foreign policy, it's possible to make what ought to be a fatal decision without ending up in catastrophe. Perhaps the clearest and most hair-raising example of a fatal mistake that should have ended in nuclear war but didn't comes from the Cuban Missile Crisis. President John F. Kennedy knew if he blockaded Cuba, the crisis might spiral out of control. He knew that with so many troops so close together, with so much tension, something could easily go wrong that would escalate step by step into a major catastrophe. But despite these concerns, Kennedy went ahead anyway. Nuclear deterrence, fear of nuclear war, didn't restrain him. And that should have been a fatal mistake, because his concern that things might get out of control was completely justified. Things almost did get out of control. The scariest out of several instances was on Saturday, October 27, 1962, the height of the crisis, with the world on the brink of nuclear holocaust. An American U-2 spy plane flying over the North Pole malfunctioned and flew off course 300 miles into the Soviet Union. Soviets saw it on radar and scrambled MiGs to shoot it down. The U.S. scrambled F-102s to find it and protect it. But because it was the height of the crisis, U.S. forces were on DEFCON 2. Air Force policy dictated that the conventional air-to-air missiles on those F-102s be removed and replaced with nuclear air-to-air missiles. The only weapons those U.S. fighters had as they roared towards Soviet airspace were nuclear weapons. If, in that era before GPS, those two groups of fighters had found each other and fought it out, there would have been a nuclear explosion over the Soviet Union and probably a nuclear war. They didn't find each other. But that wasn't because the magic of nuclear deterrence prevented nuclear war. It was because of luck. The fate of civilization was decided by chance, by a cosmic coin toss. The past record of nuclear deterrence is not reassuring. It's a cause for concern. But I'm not just arguing that nuclear deterrence will fail based on history. The proof that deterrence will fail is as indisputable as human nature, and as plain as the logic of three short sentences. Human beings are prone to follow, not just the frontline soldiers, but leaders too. No one is perfect. Human beings are involved in deterrence. We make the threats, we evaluate the threats, we decide how to respond to the threats. Nuclear deterrence isn't some machine that runs quietly without our intervention. We run. So, if human beings are fallible, and if human beings are involved in nuclear deterrence, then nuclear deterrence is inherently fallible. It will fail. And one day our luck will run out, and we'll end up in a devastating war. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. Nuclear deterrence is based on subjective ideas and has no basis in scientific fact. Nuclear deterrence has failed in the past, and it will inevitably fail in the future. Nuclear deterrence isn't the trump card that justifies keeping nuclear weapons. It's an argument with a fatal flaw. Nuclear deterrence cannot be perfect over the long run, and the consequences of failure are unacceptable. Therefore, we cannot continue to rely on nuclear deterrence. Robert Kennedy's friend and colleague David Hackett once explained to me that we not only have the ability to change the world, we not only have the power, we have a responsibility to do it. There are new, virtually unanswerable arguments against nuclear weapons that give us the kind of advantage we've never had before. This is a new moment in the history of the fight against nuclear weapons. Your parents may have marched in the 1980s, but you are in a position to end this. These arguments represent 30 years of research and thought and refinement by Global Zero, by me, by others. But the time for thinking is over. The time for action has arrived. These new, powerful, realist arguments spell the end for nuclear weapons. The truth is, you are not powerless. The truth is, history shows that any person can change the course of events. The truth is, the idea of a world without nuclear weapons, of Global Zero, is not just a pleasant vision of a future we long for but can't achieve. You are not dreaming. We can do this. So let's get to work.
Yeah, thank you, Ward. We'll take a few questions if anyone has one.
So, can I just say, I'm pushing you hard. This is new and fun. About this stuff. Give me your toughest questions.
Try to stop the mic. I think it's not here. Oh yeah, go ahead.
We talked a lot about nuclear war, but not about nuclear explosions pursued by a terrorist group. I would imagine that if we get to the point where we're zero, or we think we're zero, it's going to be ongoing, very intense intelligence worldwide to make sure that there is something that is done away with.
The thing is, a lot of people imagine that it's going to be impossible once we get to zero to stay there. Because everyone wants nuclear weapons, right? Except that's only true if there are these awesome, really great weapons that you can, that are decisive and all the things that people thought in the 50s. But if nuclear weapons are magic, then disarmament is impossible and proliferation is inevitable. But if nuclear weapons are clumsy, messy, outmoded, 70-year-old technology with hardly any uses that are enormously dangerous. It's not so hard. Technology that works. And if you have this realization that we've kind of exaggerated how wonderful nuclear weapons are, then it's a lot easier to kind of get to zero and stay there.
Well, 75% where it's also attacking the civilian population would be ideal.
Well, I think it says the people who want nuclear weapons most are terrorist groups.
The other question, if I can follow up with, some people will say that the countries that have nuclear weapons are not attacked by the U.S. It gives them a defense against attack by us. So other countries want that.
I think, yeah, some people think that nuclear weapons give you protection against big bullies. I don't think that there are technological fixes to insecurity. I think that the way that countries survive, small countries, big countries, medium-sized countries, is the way they survived for centuries. They make good alliances, they keep close to their allies, and if trouble comes, then their allies come and help. I don't believe that there's a technological fix, as you're suggesting. Yeah.
Before I ask my question, I would say on the last question, we're attacking a lot of people, so that argument isn't very good. It doesn't stop us from creating havoc around the world.
We
But
don't protect them with nuclear weapons, so we don't have
that's true.
Right.
You said that, or someone said that we had stockpiled 40,000 weapons and now it's 5. And Zach talked to me about this a little bit before we started, but can you explain exactly what those 35,000 are?
Where'd they go? Yeah. What happened to them? A lot of the Russian weapons got downblended and made into material to use in nuclear power plants. Some of them just got taken apart. You need a physicist to really know a really smart answer about this. I'm not a physicist, I know some.
It could also be for nuclear radiation for medical purposes.
I want a question from the back of the room. We're going to be back. People stand up and get a chance to ask questions. Yeah.
So my question is, without structural facilitation of nuclear disarmament, any attempts at compliance are likely to fail. Can you describe how we can cooperate on an international level to achieve a safer world and a stronger alliance with other nations?
Say it again.
Can you describe?
No, the whole thing. I want the whole thing.
Without structural facilitation of nuclear disarmament.
What is structural facilitation of nuclear disarmament?
So like a system you put in place to help countries be motivated, because you can say, oh, let's take apart the nukes, everybody, one at a time, but without like general assurances and like a system of doing it, there's no guarantee that it will happen. It's easy to say yes, but not do.
Okay, so this is a debate I have with people all the time. They always say, and to change your question a little bit, sometimes hawks and conservatives say, we've got to have ironclad treaties that force us to go to war against people that have nuclear weapons. And that's all true. If nuclear weapons are magic and they're these great weapons that would definitely give you a super advantage. I fundamentally don't think they're great weapons, and I'm happy to debate with anyone about them. I think that even if you had a nuclear monopoly, it'd be really hard to figure out a useful way to use the weapon. And so I think that the problem isn't to create rules to keep people from being motivated. I think the problem is to change the mindset that they're magic, because then people won't be motivated. And then it'll be relatively easy to set up systems, because then you'll say, those old things, yeah, okay, whatever. The fundamental problem, I think, is that we imagine that they're so incredible. They're like I don't know, somebody think of some magic symbol. Okay, so we have 2 in front, we're going to make 2, but come on, one more in back, come on. I said all these crazy things, you can't. Somebody's got, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, I know you mentioned earlier about not being able to measure the effects that nuclear weapons would have on political leaders. And I was wondering if you ever encountered a rebuttal of, when we dropped the nukes of Japan and that ended that war.
Yeah. Actually, so article in 2007 in International Security, which is one of the top 3 journals in the world on security. And it essentially demonstrates, I think, undeniably, that Japan surrendered because the Soviets came into the war. And we get taught in the United States that it was the bomb is magic. But if you look at the facts, it's absolutely clear that it was the Soviets. And this makes sense. In any war throughout history, if another great power comes into the war, everyone recalculates their chances of winning. And that's immediately what the Japanese did. Soviets brought 1.5 million men into the battle. They had a 5-to-1 superiority in tanks. They could be in Japan proper, and their plan was to be in Japan in like 2 weeks. It changed the whole calculation for Japan's leadership. The fact is they'd had 65 cities bombed that summer already, 66, and none of those bombings made them surrender. Then we bombed a couple more cities with supposedly some new weapon, but they didn't really know about that in Tokyo. They heard some rumors it might be an atomic bomb. But essentially they had endured city bombing all summer long, and it hadn't. And no other country ever in the history of war has ever surrendered after the destruction of a city. So it's doubtful based on history that this was the first time. History doesn't like first time. Okay, that was good. We had 2 from the back. Yes, now in the front. Who'd like to see first? I think I started you first.
So I'm just back to the 35,000, weapons.
Is there like some little agency that verifies that these have been dismantled and done away with?
I think the U.S., the IAEA does international monitoring of nuclear weapons. I don't know if they do stockpile. Maybe somebody help me out. Anybody? No, the answer is, I don't. I don't think, I think most of the work was bilateral between the U.S. and Soviets. We told them we were going to dismantle, and then we allowed their experts to come and look. But don't take my word for
Is it
it.
just those 2 nations that?
Well, we have 90% of the weapons, and so there've been 3 or 4 treaties, 6 maybe, between the 2 of us that brought most of the weapons down. All the other reductions in weapons have not been as a result of treaty, but just the British saying, we don't really need 325, we'll only keep 300, so they can kind of unilateral. Okay, it's the back of the room.
One more question.
Yeah? One more question. Anybody? Oh, all right. You were so eager. Although I wish someone in the back would ask me that question. Come on.
Charlie, go back.
Yeah.
What, nuclear weapons are considered the ultimate weapon, a nuclear weapon. What are you gonna offer as the ultimate weapon that will replace that idea in people's minds?
I think the way technology goes away is that something, I think about the penny farthing. Penny farthing is that turn of the century bicycle with one really big wheel and one little wheel in back. It was really hard to get up on and really dangerous to fall off. But nobody said, we've got to stuff the penny farthing genie back in the bottle. As soon as better bicycles came along, everybody said, oh, I'll just ride this better bicycle. I don't want that dumb old technology.
What is the better bicycle?
Well, I think that if I were the U.S., what I would argue is that accurate technology is the better bicycle. More discriminate technology. You want technology that can kill the other side's military. You don't want the others. You don't want weapons that are like a bull in a china shop that
Has
break.
that been invented yet?
No more accurate weapons. I think the problem is that we believe that nuclear weapons are the ultimate weapon. And that's not true. They are not the ultimate weapon. If I was a country alone in the world with just nuclear weapons, everybody else could conquer me. Wouldn't be even a question. We can have a long debate about this, but everybody has always said for 70 years that they're the ultimate weapon, and believing that they're they're the ultimate weapon is how you buy into nuclear weapons. They're just technology. They're just crummy technology. Would you buy a car that crashed into 8 cars every time you drove 2 miles? Would you buy a cake mix that splattered all over the walls every time you made the cake? Nuclear weapons are these tools that constantly break and destroy and poison, and that's not what your goal is in war. The goal of war is not to destroy things randomly. You want to beat the other side. So this notion that they're the ultimate weapon is just nonsense.
Well, I said it was a myth. I was going to destroy the myth.
You're going to destroy the
Well, that's actually a super good segue. Thank you so much for it. So hey everyone, my name is Zach Deitch-Gross. I think I've met almost. I'm so excited to be launching this campaign with all of you tonight, right here in Des Moines. So I think I've heard word speech a couple times, and the thing that always stands out to me is that I find myself nodding my head and thinking, God, Ward's so smart. And he is, but Ward just saying these things doesn't solve nuclear weapons, doesn't eliminate nuclear weapons. This isn't a problem of some area I don't know of. It's not an economic problem, it's not an environmental problem, it's not a scientific myth. This is about our political leaders dragging their feet and not taking steps to make for a safer, more secure world. And that's why I'm so excited to see you all tonight and to be launching this Race to Zero campaign. We're going to be making sure our next president and that the next 4 to 8 years are set in a time where we move forward toward a world free of nuclear weapons and not moving backwards towards one where more and more countries have them and they exist. But we need people like you to do that. You, the people in this room, are the start of how we're going to convince our presidential candidates on both sides of the aisle to make a difference in this movement. So that starts right here tonight. I actually grew up in California, and I grew up really inspired by Cesar Chavez and the farm workers movement. And he was asked, how did you build this movement? How did you change the world? And he said, I talked to one person, and then I talked to another person, and then I talked to another person, and she talked to another person, and he talked to another person, and that's how we built this movement. And it's going to take a movement to eliminate nuclear weapons, but it starts from the people in this room. It starts right here in Des Moines. It starts right here in Iowa with 86 days until the caucus. That this is our opportunity to get presidential candidates standing for a nuclear-free world and taking steps to get there. But we need your help to do it. So Global Zero is launching our week of action, starting right here, right now. Touring around the country, around the state, with our street art and making sure we're educating people, raising awareness, and getting our presidential candidates taking strong stances for the elimination of nuclear weapons. We're going to be in Ames, we're going to be here in Des Moines, we're going to be in Iowa City, we're going to be at Cornell College, Mount Vernon, Iowa. Shout out to the kids in the back. But we're going to be educating people. We're going to be going to this very week. We're going to be going to events with Jeb Bush, Carly Fiorina, and Rand Paul, asking them what they're going to do if they're president to eliminate nuclear weapons. But we need your help to do that. We want you involved in all of these actions. So as you'll see, and Anna, can you raise your hand in the back? We have these commitment cards. They say, I commit to working to get our presidential candidates to eliminate nuclear weapons in 2016 because blank. And the first step to you getting involved and you making a difference is filling out one of those commitment cards and saying why you care. And checking that box at the bottom says, I want to volunteer. I want to join this movement to eliminate nuclear weapons, because we can't do it without you. And it starts with the people in this room talking to their friends, talking to their coworkers, and getting in front of presidential candidates and asking them to take action, to do the right thing. So please fill out that card. What you can do is we'll be touring around with that street art. If you haven't seen in the back, it looks really cool. You look like you're falling into the nuclear abyss. Take a picture with it tonight or come out to one of our events around the state this week. Help us tweet out pictures of the street art, making sure that we spread the word globally. We have 500,000 members around the world. And when we tweet out and do things like that, when we share it with our email list or post it on Facebook, we connect to the global community that's here, that's standing with us in spirit tonight to eliminate nuclear weapons. So you can join us tonight by taking action and filling out that card. You can take a picture with that street art with Jonah Hill and join us on our week of action. And you can get involved with us bird dogging presidential candidates. Alyssa talked to Hillary Clinton and asked her what she would do as president to eliminate nuclear weapons 2 weeks ago. Corey and Brittany in the back talked to Rand Paul and Marco Rubio asking them what they wanted to do. We've been in their faces, we've been talking to them, but we need to do it more. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We need to show that there's the people power to make a difference, but we need more people involved. We need people like you to really do that. So getting involved, filling out those commitment cards is the first step, and I really, again, I'm just so happy to be here with you all tonight and kicking off this campaign. And have one more request. So you've eaten food, you've heard from Ward, but when I talk about this being a global movement, I mean it, and Global Zero means it. So the last thing we want to do tonight, and we want to mingle and we want to talk, and Ward will stick around for questions, but we have our awesome Race to Zero banner right here. Which shout out to Alex, our digital man who designed it all. It looks amazing. But we want to take a picture with everybody here under the Global Zero banner to remind them and share it with the entire list around the world, with our entire movement, to show that we started right here 365 days before the 2016 presidential election. We started right here in Des Moines to make sure we took steps toward a better, safer world. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. We can all slowly move towards that banner. I'll be here to stick around and ask questions, but thank you all, and have a great night. Banner time. And then look for your commitment cards as well.
I just. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to drop that. This is the commitment card, and I'll try to focus with just like you would fill out on a postcard.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll just tuck that in my pocket with my tablet.
I don't see any banner.
It's been moved to the back of the room.
You see it?
Yeah, I have to guide her to the back.
Yeah.
Alright guys, stop. We're gonna try something crazy and make you all go in the abyss. So if you could kind of move aside, we're gonna move the street art forward.
Yeah, just
I'm going to put you.
Do we need to put 2 rows of people like yes. Yeah. Bring the banner forward.
You guys are all you're standing right on the edge.
We'll do a couple shots. The smiles might look a little strange in front of escaping.
Want us to look scared?
We'll do both. Want to fix my scared?
Yeah, we'll do scared first.
Okay.
If some sit on the floor, maybe that might work too.
Yeah, I think it might.
Oh, yeah, okay, Brittany, you have to step back over.
Yeah, you blocked the.
Alright, this is gonna be the afraid face, scared face first, everyone. I'm gonna try my best to count backwards from 3.
Yeah, we're afraid.
We're afraid. We're afraid. Everyone's afraid.
This is like a 200-foot drop. Alright, 3, 2, 1. Alright, now we'll try an awkward, smiling, happy. Even though there's a giant. Okay, I'm gonna count down from 3.
Nuclear annihilation, we.
3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you everyone.
One more? Yeah, can we
Yeah.
go 0? 0?
Oh, zero.
Zero.
Look, that's zero.
Alright, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Cool.
Thank you all. Don't forget to fill out the cards as well. Get more food and hang out.
I'm gonna take my juice. I'll probably disconnect from my power pack. Oops. Upside down. Sorry about that. I put you upside down. Put everybody upside down. So I do apologize for that. So I'm gonna disconnect from my power pack so I'm a little more mobile.